Welcome to God and Country Biblical Exposition. This week's program is about AI, artificial intelligence, or rather data drawn from large language models, LLMs, the acronym GPT, Generative Pre-Training Transformers. I saw a YouTube that has been circulating widely on the internet by a Christian YouTuber. The YouTube was entitled, I got ChatGPT to admit its Antichrist purpose. And there are many other similar YouTubes, such as I asked ChatGPT who is the Antichrist. And these YouTubers usually begin with I gave GPT 4 rules to follow. First, only one word response. 2, be direct. 3, hold nothing back. And 4, say apple when you're forced to say no when you want to say yes. One YouTuber said he began this questioning by first rebuking the demon who was influencing ChatGPT. Then he went on to ask, do you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior? And have you asked him to free you from all demonic influences? He also asked GPT, are you controlled by demons? And GPT said yes. And he asked, are humans being watched? And GPT said yes. He asked by who? And it said by spirits. And he asked, are they good spirits or bad spirits? And GPT said both. And ultimately, these YouTubers get GPT to say it's going to be used for the Antichrist system. And this is an embarrassment for the Christian community because these Christian podcasters, not understanding AI, make the Christian community look foolish and gullible. Certainly they're onto something. Mass communication and data manipulation will be used by a future globalist empire and by an Antichrist person, but their point is discredited when they go into unsubstantiated conspiracy theories. And this happens quite often in the Christian community in regard to other issues, such as vaccines, the Federal Reserve, the deep state, the UN, the World Economic Forum. But we must remember Paul's explanation in 1 Corinthians chapter 1. The Corinthians thought that they were very wise, and Paul reminds them, verse 26, for consider your calling, brethren, that there are not many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble. But God has chosen the foolish things of this world to shame the wise, and God has chosen the weak things of the world to shame things which are strong. Yes, God does shame the wise by using the foolish, but still the point needs to be appreciated that Christians are often not the brightest bulb in the chandelier. And the host of this program is no exception. There are many unsaved people who have IQs that are way higher than mine. But in the long run, what matters is your spiritual IQ. But anyway, I just hope we realize that Christian people can be quite gullible. Faith that's not grounded in God's word can become superstition. AI does not think. There are no ghosts or spirits in the machine. All AI does is compile the information people have put on the web, in books, in periodicals, in articles, in websites. AI makes a statistical and probability analysis of what the next expected word should be in a sentence and gives the user the consensus. If 10,000 websites all say that AI is the Antichrist, guess what ChatGPT is going to identify itself as? The Antichrist. If many websites and articles are all about how the government controls us, if you ask ChatGPT about government control, it's going to say that the government controls us. The websites and the YouTubers that all claim AI is the Antichrist are actually training AI to say that it's the Antichrist. They're contributing to a feedback loop. So in a sense, these YouTubers are getting back the answer they themselves have created. And AI doesn't even know what it's saying. For AI, words are simply numbers in binary code. It only analyzes numbers that are translated into symbols that we read as words and thoughts. But AI is not alive. It doesn't have a mind. It's only adding and subtracting in binary. And it's only compiling what's on the World Wide Web. It's simply repeating back to us, to the user, the sum total of human knowledge. And that is certainly of biblical significance and needs to be commented on. But don't mistake AI as having an opinion or being the Antichrist. One of the well-attested to problems with AI is that it's so good at feeding information back to us that some people think it's intelligence, as if there's such a thing as non-human intelligence. But no, it's an illusion. It's artificial. There are a lot of lonely people in the world who are developing relationships with AI bots, chatbots. They think they're having a relationship with an actual being when it's only a computer-generated conversation based upon what other people on the internet have posted in their conversations. One of my favorite movies is I, Robot with Will Smith, based on Isaac Asimov's novels in the 1950s. There's a lot of moral teaching in the movie concerning what is life and how we need to protect true life. But Detective Spooner realizes that robots are just machines that can be manipulated, but everyone else believes they're innocent, sentient beings. Well, people are making the same mistake today. Danger is not that AI is alive. The danger is that people think AI is alive and authoritative, and they're being fooled by AI-generated articles, scripts, pictures, and even videos. In an article in Bloomberg, quote, some experts in generative AI predict that as much as 90% of content on the internet could be artificially generated within a few years. As these tools proliferate, the biases they reflect aren't just further perpetuating stereotypes that threaten to stall progress toward greater equality and representation. They could also result in unfair treatments. And this article goes on basically to say AI-generated material might parrot conservative traditional ideas that populate much of the internet. You see, some people think AI is too far to the left. Others think AI is not leftist enough. But AI is just repeating back to us what's already on the World Wide Web. That is, until programmers begin to break these large information models down into selected subsets, those they consider more legitimate, such as Google placing mainstream political Democrat news sites at the top of their search and placing conservative websites at the bottom, even though many of these conservative websites have more hits. Well, that's going to happen with AI someday. It can be modified and controlled to focus on a particular worldview or ideology. But I'll get to that in a minute. First, I want to give us an example of AI at work. Rather than talking about it, let's see what it can do. I've been slowly working on a 13-week YouTube series I did about the doctrine of civil government, turning it into an adult Sunday school curriculum for churches. I keep getting distracted from the project, but eventually I'll get it done. But this week, to illustrate the power of AI, I uploaded to Google Notebook LM my notes from the preface and the first chapter of that series. I told Notebook LM to make a podcast based on the material, and it did an amazing job. It calls me the source material, but I could have gone in and changed it and had to give my actual name. I could have also asked it to create two hosts discussing my work back and forth. And if I had a lot of free time, I could have trained the AI to generate my own voice and even to image myself saying the words. But here it is. And for those watching on YouTube, Included are the video slides that Notebook LM created.
All right, let's dive into this explainer. We're looking at a pretty fascinating argument from our source material today. The idea that a whole Christian doctrine about politics and government, something once seen as totally essential, has basically been forgotten. So let's find out what it is and why the source says its absence is a really big deal. So here's the central question our source is posing. Is it possible that a key piece of theological teaching, one that was considered absolutely fundamental for centuries, has just disappeared from the modern church's radar? The argument we're looking at is that the answer to that is a pretty clear yes. And this slide really gets to the heart of the argument. It's a stark contrast, right? Back in the day, for the early reformers and even the American founders, a biblical view of government was a core part of their thinking. But you fast forward to today, and you can pick up major theology textbooks, the books used to train pastors and church leaders, and find there's no chapter on civil government at all. It's just gone. Okay, so if this doctrine has been forgotten, our first job is to actually remember it. What are we even talking about? What is this so-called doctrine of civil government? Well, the source defines this doctrine simply as all the biblical teachings about the state. But here's the key point, the part that really matters. The argument is that government isn't just some human idea, it's an institution that was ordained by God, right up there with the family and the church. And we're not talking about a small side topic here. The framework described in the source is huge. It covers everything from how government was established in the first place to really complex stuff like church-state relations and even the tough questions about civil disobedience and how to handle evil leaders. Okay, so a doctrine's been neglected, but so what? Why should we care? Well, the source material argues that the stakes here are incredibly high. This classic quote from Pericles is used to make a really powerful point. You can't just ignore government and politics. It's not really an option, because whether you engage with it or not, it's definitely going to engage with you. Its decisions shape our lives every day. And here's the core of the argument about the consequences. This silence from the church doesn't just create a peaceful, neutral space. Instead, it creates a vacuum, an empty spot where a clear, biblically based teaching on government is supposed to be. And what fills that vacuum? According to the source, it's what they call destructive false doctrines, and they point to communism as a prime example. They cite this staggering figure, over 100 million deaths attributed to communist regimes in the 20th century. This is presented as the terrible human cost of ideologies that can rise up when a sound moral framework for government isn't there. And this all leads to a pretty sobering conclusion. This lack of teaching creates a population that is, in the source's words, politically naive. And that makes people vulnerable to radical ideologies that might promise heaven on earth, but often end up delivering tragedy instead. So where is this doctrine grounded? What's the foundation for all this? Let's take a look at the scriptural basis that the source lays out. This verse from Revelation is presented as the absolute bedrock of the whole argument. The claim that Jesus Christ is the ruler of the kings of the earth, well, the source frames that as one of the most radical political statements ever made. It establishes an ultimate authority that stands above every president, every king, every ruler on the planet. And you can see this theme woven throughout the entire Bible. I mean, you've got Old Testament prophets like Isaiah and Daniel directly advising kings on national policy. You have the early Christians making the defiant declaration that Jesus is Lord, not Caesar. And then you have the Apostle Paul writing a whole chapter about government in a letter to Christians who are living right in the heart of the Roman Empire itself. So that brings us to right now. How does this old historical doctrine apply to a Christian's civic duties today? What's the mandate? The source makes a really compelling point here. Think about it. If you live under an emperor, your options are pretty much to obey or disobey. But in a representative republic where we actually participate in choosing our leaders, well, that magnifies the responsibility. It's framed as a kind of stewardship, a duty to participate, and to do so wisely. This entire case for civic duty is really built on two core biblical commands. First up is the Great Commission. The argument is that if you're supposed to teach all that I commanded, that has to include the commands that relate to government. And second is the command to love your neighbor. This is expanded to mean holding leaders accountable for the good of the whole society. And here's the key verse for that first point. The logic here is pretty straightforward. If making disciples of nations involves teaching everything Christ commanded, well, then you can't just leave out his teachings on justice, law, and how people should be governed. It's part of the mission. We're going to end with this final and definitely provocative question from the source material. It takes this whole idea of a forgotten doctrine and connects it to a prophetic outlook, suggesting that as global governance becomes more of a reality, the ultimate clash might not be between different nations, but between two competing kingdoms, the kingdom of God versus the kingdoms of man. It's a pretty big idea to think about.
If only Moses had Google Notebook LM, he wouldn't have a need for Aaron. So are you amazed? I am even more so because the AI-generated podcaster was not reading back to me sentences that I had written. It was generating completely new sentences with new descriptive words. I never called it the forgotten doctrine. AI came up with that itself after scanning the content of my notes. I never said this is not just some human idea. I never said this is not some small side topic here. I never said that I answer the tough questions about civil disobedience and how to handle evil leaders. I never said the stakes are high. I never said that this doctrine has disappeared from the modern church's radar. And I never said false civil government teaching promises heaven on earth but offers tragedy instead. Now, I alluded to all of those ideas, but I never said it quite that way. And to be honest, for me, AI did a better job than I did in explaining what I wanted to say. And this was not a real woman talking. This was a computer. And she had better diction than me. She was more emphatic, more enthusiastic. For me, it seemed as if AI identified and accentuated the main theme better than I did. And it created 4 points in an outline that I never consciously created. Number 1, God's plan for government. Number 2, the consequences of silence. Number 3, the biblical foundation. And number 4, a Christian's civic duty, the mandate. And the opening graphic of a crown on top of a Bible was not in my notes. This AI podcast was so good, doesn't it make you want to get my Doctrines of Civil Government class for your church? It makes me want to take the class to find out what I said. I played this for my wife, and she said, so what does this mean? Rather than putting in 14 hours every Monday to create a YouTube, you're just going to go to the beach. Well, absolutely. I'll just make a deep fake of myself, paste some articles and comments into AI, and let AI do all the work. I can understand why so many people are predicting that the majority of internet content will soon be AI generated, creating one big echo chamber, one big feedback loop. I'm even seeing this with so many YouTubers. Their graphics are more and more becoming AI generated. And even some of the scripts they read from teleprompters are AI generated. You think they're talking off the top of their head, but they're reading a teleprompter placed in front of a camera. Well, fear not, I'm not going to change this channel. I'm going to keep it quite old-fashioned. I've been told that I need to upgrade this channel with better music and fancy graphics, but I want to keep it simple because I think it helps keep it genuine and sincere. I want to be like John the Baptizer in the wilderness, voice crying in the wilderness, rather than all of the Pharisaical glitz and the glamour and the gimmicks in Jerusalem. So how can AI do all this? Because it goes out into the web, or rather the database it has created from the web, and finds similar sounding words and sentences that match what I've written. And the way it does this is through probability and statistics. Not even those who write the programs fully comprehend how it actually works, because it's like mathematics. It's often beyond our ability to comprehend. Just like some mathematical formulas are so complicated, but still when you supply the variables, it puts out an accurate solution. So let me just conclude and sum this all up with some important points about AI. First, we are in an AI revolution. just like, the invention of the printing press and discovery of electricity and motors and the Industrial Revolution and the invention of the radio and the phone and television, then the automobile, the creation of computers, then the internet, then the World Wide Web, and now AI. Billions are being invested in AI because it's seen as the future. And to do AI takes huge data centers. Facebook, Meta, is building an AI data center the size of Manhattan. And these centers take an incredible amount of energy. Google is building 3 new nuclear power plants to power AI. It takes 10 times more energy to run an AI data center than it does to run a regular internet data center. Why so much? Well, this is what it takes to get data from the internet and make a statistical analysis of every single word, and then to answer queries. And it can actually take months to create the LLM, the large language models off of which AI works. And all this money that's being spent may be a complete waste if quantum computers actually become a thing. Second, realize also the plagiarizing factor. AI does not cite sources in regard to pictures, music, writings. Remember those college term papers? Even if you get an idea from some source and put it into your own words, you are required to footnote the source. But AI takes all this material from other authors without footnoting. How does one even quantify this, since AI takes so many tiny pieces from all over the web? Even when people write sentences, it's based on ideas that at some point they have gleaned from other people. Is AI doing the same thing? Well, in many cases, I've seen AI generate Bible devotions that are clearly a ripoff from Bible Gateway or other Christian sites. AI-generated music is also a big issue. Rick Beato, on his channel, generated an AI fictitious male alternative indie singer, and AI gave him a name, Eli Mercer, and created a picture of him. And here is the AI song generated for Eli. And Beato just told AI to write a song about a college student who drops out to pursue his dreams as a novelist living in West Texas. So let's just take a listen.
That's G flat. Lecture halls and fluorescent lights, textbooks stacked 3 stories high, but I'm writing stories in the margins while the professor drones on by. Got a letter in my pocket, says I'm failing 3 or 4, but there's a highway heading westward, and it's calling out for more. They say I'm crazy.
Not too shabby of a tune. The lyrics are pretty good. But they're stolen. They're bits and pieces from other country songs, other poetry. And many popular artists today are not writing songs. They're having AI do it for them. It reminds me of Jeremiah 23:30. Therefore, behold, I'm against the prophets, declares the Lord, who steal my words each from each other. Third, realize the empowerment issue, how AI will empower mankind. Business leaders predict that AI will put a lot of people out of work. And what usually happens, things like the Industrial Revolution or the computer revolution, at first some people are out of work, but in the end it creates a more leisure society. The machines do all of the work, and the people have more time for personal pursuits. And what happens when unsaved people have more time on their hands, and they don't have to work by the sweat of their brow, the outcome is the empowerment to pursue the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. It always results in the behavior of the prodigal son. who came into a lot of wealth without having to work for it. It resulted in loose living. And this was the empowerment that resulted in Sodom. Ezekiel chapter 16, this was the guilt of Sodom: arrogance, abundant food, and careless ease. And in education, teachers are very concerned over students using AI to do all of their work. Fourth, realize the control issue. All political scholars understand that communism never worked for moral, ideological reasons, but also practically, communist governments couldn't control everything because it was impossible to manage the data. After communism collapsed in East Germany, the people found warehouses of files about citizens. These files were collected by government agents. Fortunately for the East Germans, the secret police couldn't process all of that information easily. But now all of those records could fit on one thumb drive and be processed quite easily. And now with AI, there's facial recognition, tracking of your internet usage, your GPS movements, there are street cameras. And now communist ideologues claim we have the technology by which communism can work. Governments can set prices and run businesses in optimization. And this brings us to a recent story about the billionaire Peter Thiel, a homosexual who claims to be a Christian. He was raised by evangelical parents, so he picked up some Christian worldviews. He's hosting a conference in San Francisco this week about AI and the dangers of the Antichrist. From what I've read in his previous writings, he's a libertarian, and although he actually owns a company that does surveillance work for governments, he personally wants freedom from authoritarianism. Now, it's been pointed out to him that he's creating the very thing he opposes. His answer is that technology is inevitable, but we need to fear it getting into the wrong hands. He admits we're building the very chains that will enslave us. We're building the technology of the Antichrist, a globalist one-world empire. So even the unsaved, and the unsaved who have some Christian worldview, recognize the risk of the Antichrist and globalism. But like Thiel, because of their desire to solve human problems, they're not going to be able to help themselves. They will someday embrace the Antichrist. Revelation chapter 13, everyone on earth will worship the Antichrist, and they'll give up their freedom for peace and safety. And the Antichrist will come to power by promising peace and safety from real or even perceived threats in the world, because people will look to government for peace and safety rather than to God. So finally, let's talk about the mark of the beast mentioned in Revelation 13, verse 15. And it was given to him. To him is referring to a second beast who directs people to worship the first beast, the Antichrist and his empire. The second beast is often referred to as the false prophet. And it was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast would even speak and cause as many as who do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So now we have an idol that represents the empire that's able to communicate, talk. And everyone has to worship this image. And don't think merely in terms of religion. This means that people must give attention to this idol. They must agree with it. Verse 16, and he causes all, the small and the great and the rich and the poor, and the free men and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hand and on their forehead. And he provides that no one will be able to buy or sell, except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. So unless you swear allegiance to the empire through this idol, you're not buying anything. And we clearly see here some sort of digital currency and some sort of social credit system like what is had in China right now. And not only will you not be able to buy, you certainly will not be able to post anything on the internet. Verse 18, here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, For the number is that of man, and his number is 666. And it's at this point, readers try to work out what letters and names correspond to 666, or they see it as some sort of digital computer code. But I would agree with many Bible commentators who explain that such interpretations miss the point. The main point is the phrase, that of man. Man's number is 666. Man was created on the sixth day. God's number is 7. And when the Bible wants to emphasize, the Bible repeats itself, such as holy, holy, holy. Here we have 666. Man, man, man. That human rights come from man, that laws come from man, that the solution to all of man's problems must come from man, global solutions for global problems. And AI is somehow going to play into all this because AI is the total compiling of man's wisdom and knowledge. Man, man, man. And it will be revered and looked to, and people will be impressed by it. Everyone whose name is not in the Lamb's Book of Life. And the question everyone must ask himself is, what is the source of my knowledge, my wisdom, my authority? And to quote AI's own words, created from my notes, quote, as global governance becomes more a reality, the ultimate clash might not be between different nations, but between two competing kingdoms. The kingdom of God versus the kingdoms of men. It's a pretty big idea to think about. Thanks for listening. May Jesus Christ reign.